Gene Cummings is with us, Deputy Washington Bureau Chief for the Wall Street Journal, with which this network shares common ownership. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Shep.
What more do we know about the plight of his people?
We don't know a whole lot because
was our description, generally speaking, accurate as far as we know?
Certainly, as far as we know from excuse me, we know from defectors what the conditions are over there. The number of defectors in the past year, given the new restrictions on immigration and migration that the Trump administration has imposed, the number of recent defectors is down to two, literally two.
Two people.
But two people have gained, North Koreans have gained access to the United States. And the numbers were always low, but this obviously is a record low. But those defectors who have come in have described the very kinds of conditions that you're talking about, and what you described was in a United Nations report in recent years. So, yes, those are the conditions that people are enduring over there, and that is why so many human rights advocates wanted very much for the president to put that issue on the table in a more animated way than it appears to have been.
You mentioned that there's a sort of rhetorical carrot and stick bit of action happening here.
Definitely. One thing that we've seen about the president with his negotiations, both domestic and abroad, is that he has a tendency to try to soften up his target with some tough rhetoric and then try to bring that person to the table with compliments. So it's carrots and sticks. He did it with Mexico, where he was very hard on them, and then tried to bring them into NAFTA negotiations. It didn't work then. We'll see if this works now.
This juxtaposition of the beating up of our friends, rhetorically, and the hugging of our enemies, physically, is striking and feels historical. And I wonder what the lens of history will do to it all.
Well, I know all of this will be judged by history, and so we're probably not going to know at the end of the Trump administration really what kind of grade he will get in the history books, because much will depend on how North Korea evolves after these talks, after any kind of agreement. That's the same is true, for instance, of the Iraq War. We can't really measure it until we see what becomes of Iraq. And the same would be the case here. It does feel historic. It's a different approach than we have seen in decades. And maybe a different approach is what was needed. Certainly that was the argument President Obama made about Cuba. We've done it one way for 30 years. Why not try something different?
Of course, Ben Rhodes went in and talked to Castro's next of kin 20 times before President Obama had the first conversation. So there is a difference.
There is.
Gene Cummings, from a Deputy Washington Bureau Chief for the Wall Street Journal, our good friends and corporate partners, thank you so much.
You bet.